What's up, Penn State fans? It is Wednesday, September 17th, and that means it's time for a new edition of BWI Live. It's Penn State's bye week. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I am Greg Pickle from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and today's show, as always, when we are here on the BWI Live show, is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody will get you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find grills, canopies, jerseys, and more. A big thank you goes out again to Academy Sports and Outdoors. Be sure to check them out as Penn State sits amid its first bye week of the year, another one coming up, T. Frank, in October. We heard from James Franklin for the first and only time during this week off, at least from the game field for the Nittany Lions on Tuesday. Today, following the show, and if you're catching us on replay, some of this stuff will already be up at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Justin Lustig and Jim Knowles are set to speak with reporters this afternoon. So, T. Frank, it's a bye week. It's not an off week, as Penn State made very clear last night. You were out of practice. Just your general thoughts on that and this week so far. And I guess let me ask you this, kind of to wrap up both questions. Bye week come at a good time for Penn State?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the funny thing is, from a personal perspective, I was assuming I'd be like full steam 2 weeks to prep for Oregon, and I'm still arguing about Drew Allar's completion percentage and field vision from Villanova. Like, we're still having that conversation. So I think it's a great split for us from the non-conference season to kind of recap what we saw and then transition into this Big Ten season. And I think it is a big deal for Penn State to get that bye week before Oregon for a bunch of different reasons, including cleaning up some of the things that we saw in non-conference of what trimming things down player and scheme-wise to really hone in and be sharp on these things. And having a little bit extra time to prepare is always a good thing. Like, there's never enough time in the week for a football team to get ready for its next opponent. To have a little bit extra time is gold. And I think it is before this particular matchup. I think it's also really advantageous. But for us, like, it provides a great split for us to see what we saw and preview what we haven't seen yet, which is kind of what we're doing today.
Yeah, so a lot to get to. Practice recap, James Franklin highlights from his, again, only news conference of bye week. We have some stock up and stock down to mess with later in the show, some best bets presented by BetMGM. But first, let's get into last night's practice recap, T. Frank. The Nittany Lions were welcoming us out to the field for practice on Tuesday night. I'm looking for the little practice intro. I can't find it.
You gotta win, guys. You gotta win.
Thank you very much for pressing the buttons for me. All right, so practice during the bye week. Obviously, Penn State players who were in scout team uniforms last week back in their regular jersey numbers. Yeah. But T. Frank, your first big takeaway was that this kind of was a chance for the two deep to reset. Obviously, the snap count sheet tells us plenty about where things stand from a depth chart perspective, and our observations from the first 3 weeks do as well. What did you learn, though, on that front Tuesday night?
Yeah, and I think James Franklin talked about it. We're going to get into that in just a second, but this was an opportunity. During game week, they are practicing the plays for the players, right? So they are focusing on what they're going to be doing on Saturday. With no game, it opens it back up to more of a training camp style of you're getting multiple players through route progressions together rather than having to work on the timing and rhythm between the quarterback and his intended target on a play. Right. So more of those young players get involved in the drills and get involved with the starters. And I just kind of the filter up, Ethan Grunkmeyer was with the ones along with Drew Allar instead of being split between ones and twos, with then Jackson Smollett going over and running the D squad. Now you have Smollett working with the twos, and then the kind of some of those guys working with the top group. And I think that the two that stood out to me were Cam Wallace and Quentin Martin getting to work with Drew Allar. We've been talking about who's going to be that third guy or who's going to be the rotational player. It's not going to be a huge role within the Penn State offense, but if they had a third running back they trusted, I think there would be some aspects of that being involved in this particular game plan. At this point, I don't think that's the case, but just so you feel confident that you have something happens to Singleton or Allen and somebody gets banged up. We saw it last year. We saw it the year before. Football's a physical game. Running backs, they even if they're not injured and out, they can still be less effective if they're playing through something, and you might want somebody to take some of those reps off, especially, I think as Nate pointed it, in the meat grinder, that muddled middle of the Big Ten schedule where they're facing teams that you feel like they're going to beat, and how you get through that game efficiently and effectively will determine whether or not you get some of those young guys to take reps off the veterans for a season they want to be 17 games long. So, that was, to me, that was the emphasis this week, was seeing who some of those young guys were that were getting looks, who was standing out in that situation, and where they lined up in the two deep, or where they lined up. And it was just, Greg, you know this, it was also easier that everyone was in their own number.
Well, yes,
so I knew who they were. I didn't have to guess or go and look at like everything as if it were crime scene footage, like zooming in to see if somebody has a mustache to make sure it's Egan Boyer. Like I knew who they were because their number matched the roster.
Yeah, that's always the fun part of in regular season weeks in season when Penn State has an opponent coming up. You're trying to figure out who those scout team guys are. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it is not easy at all. I want to say good morning and hello to everyone in the chat here on YouTube. Thanks for being with us. If you're listening via podcast or YouTube on replay, thanks for joining us as well. For those of you on the YouTube channel, I'm going to hit some one-on-one practice clips T. Frank put together from Tuesday night. One thing you want to get to here, I know, T. Frank, is your impressions of King Mack. Obviously, he had a bigger role in Penn State's win over Villanova. James Franklin discussed after the game how he really kind of came on. It seems like, at least if you listen to James Franklin's comments from last Saturday, which you can, of course, do here on the YouTube channel, really came on once the season started and has apparently passed Antoine Belgrave Shorter, who won that job next to Zakee Wheatley out of camp this early in the season.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was trying to figure out is that now the status quo. Did Belgrave Shorter get a couple games, and then King Mack gets a couple games, and then Mack was the starter out there with the starting unit as they were going through some drills where they, had the whole team defense out there working on some of their concepts and some of the things they're trying to accomplish, where you can only do it like with the full coverage unit. So seeing him as that starter there solidifies what we saw in the non-conference season, where he was the most effective in terms of making plays on the ball and then getting that starter position for the final game and taking a lot of the reps. So, yeah, I think that determines. And here's the thing, too, about some of the rep conversation with those safeties. It also matters when those reps are coming in the game. And I haven't had a chance to go back and actually chart, because I've been charting every game where they line up, not just in terms of how many reps they've taken. When do they take those reps? Is it with the starting unit? Is it during garbage time? And then is it the field or the boundary position, specifically for that safety role? And Mack, in that game, had the lion's share of those starter reps next to Zakee Wheatley. So just confirming all these things, I would say that like he's the guy at that position. So now, instead of having a redshirt freshman or a sophomore, they have a guy who's a veteran, maybe young in terms of playing experience, but a guy who's been in football for a while next to Zakee Wheatley. And I think they want to play who's ever the most effective, but you trust veterans a little more than you trust young guys. And I think that is the ideal, what they were hoping would work out in this situation this year.
One thing, I'll float this theory by you quick, but I think another part of this conversation is speed. And so James Franklin has spent some time the last 3 weeks talking about wanting his defense to play fast. And he's not necessarily talking about running fast. He's talking about reacting fast. He's talking about playing more than thinking. But King Mack is legitimately one of, if not the fastest players on this team. And speed matters in Jim Knowles' defense. And it may not be the top concern, but it matters. And so I think that could have as much to do with this as anything. But I think more importantly, T. Frank, at the start of the season, I don't know about you, but you knew what you had in Wheatley, and then you probably did not feel so good about the depth at a safety position. And 3 weeks in, if you're looking for maybe underrated positives, I think you can feel pretty good about that at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that Antoine Belgrave Shorter at one point was leading and had won that position means that like he's not so far off that you can't play him. It just is one of those situations where, as you mentioned, athleticism and aggression, I think, is what has separated King Mack. Way back when, let's go all the way back to when they first reacquired him via the portal.
Right.
What you just mentioned made me think he would be better for the Caleb Downs role for that hybrid position over Zakee Wheatley, just because of that explosiveness. The fact that they had him in the nickel position shows you the versatility he can bring to the table theoretically, right? In terms of his height, weight, speed, size maybe isn't the thing for him, but his closing ability, his power through contact, he is a hitter for a guy who's 5'9". So the fact that they have him now at that other safety position, I think, as you mentioned, brings more dynamic ability to that secondary. So yeah, absolutely. I think having King Mack transition from a guy that we weren't really sure where he was going to play to now, I think is a big deal for Penn State to have three guys, I would say, that you trust, with another guy who's insanely talented in Dejon Lane, who I think is still working through some of the reacting correctly. Like, he's reacting, and he's reacting fast. The problem is sometimes it's the wrong direction. So he's still working on fine-tuning, his instincts in the game.
Yeah, T. Frank, one last practice thought you wanted to get to was the the two deep look at tackle. I'm not sure if you meant offensive tackle, defensive tackle, or perhaps both. Offensive tackle. Okay, so let's run through that. Egan Boyer made his Penn State debut on Saturday against Villanova. We saw Owen Alancidi play earlier this year, so I don't know if Penn State necessarily needs to go like they did with Kenny Wosley and John Mitchell last year, where it was like one game was his, one game was the other guy's, so that way neither burned their red shirt. I don't think obviously Penn State's in a position to need to do that along the offensive line, but they could, especially when it comes to travel squad opportunities and getting those guys' feet wet for the future. So just your overall assessment of the two deep at tackle aside from those two freshmen.
So the first thing I would say is the best ability is availability. Just undercut the saying there by putting the end at the front. And after a rough first year, Garrett Sexton has been very durable through practice. He's been available and has, I'm not going to say solidified himself at the right tackle position, but even when Javen Williams came back, he slid over to left tackle. So he is a part of this conversation in the two deep. Now, is he fourth among a non-linear depth chart of tackles, or maybe is he fifth if or also including Anthony Donko in this conversation? I think so. Yeah. But at the same time, like when you're looking at the structured two deep, he seems firmly in that right tackle position, and then Egan Boyer coming back, as you mentioned, at that left tackle position. Penn State now has a solid two deep, especially with Boyer, who I know that there's a lot of enthusiasm for, and I think he's still working his way back from injury. I don't think he's fully back in terms of I didn't dig into his individual play as much, but he didn't seem like he had maybe some of that explosiveness or aggression in the run game that we had been told about. And I think part of that might be, injury related, coming back from whatever it was. But you saw you could clearly see why he was somebody they were high on, just in the limited reps. That solidifies that second tier of offensive linemen. Also considering that the first tier has flexibility within it that we've discussed multiple times with Anthony Donko playing both guard and tackle. So just that, I've been tracking of who's where in that lineup. Javen Williams was not with the two deep. I can't say he wasn't at practice. He might have been with the D squad, but they had offensive players going through tackle drills. I'm assuming that's a special teams thing. And then, they have King Mack at times goes through ball security drills because he's a returner. So there is at certain points like a mix and match, and I was trying to do double duty yesterday, so I didn't confirm whether Javen was there or not. But at the same time, he wasn't in that too deep. So he's been banged up. We've talked about it. He's had a brace on his wrist, whether it's a wrist or a thumb, whatever it might be. And then we saw him in not practicing with the D squad or with the second team unit last week. So I think that's just kind of informative of what the situation is there. And the more consistently you're available, I think Garrett Sexton in this kind of middle of the pack conversation at tackle, I think he's made strides by being available and playing well when we got a chance to see him play well. That's not to say he's not on the D squad. We've seen him practice as a D squad player, but these are kind of the nuances we're trying to pick up at practice.
Right. So Penn State done with practice with us on hand, at least for this week. They will be on the practice field again today. They will be on the practice field with just the coordinators and other coaches who are not yet out on the road recruiting on Thursday. James Franklin said he was leaving tonight to get an early start on recruiting, T. Frank. So that was one of the things he talked about yesterday. Between the lines, we're going to get to some more.
They have both gotten reps with runs.
All right, T. Frank. What other thing James Franklin talked about, something you, me, and the commenters know about well, is the fact that if you want to go to Penn State, Oregon, it's not going to be cheap to stay in State College, to go into Beaver Stadium for the game. But college football is in full spring. The MLB postseason is approaching. The NFL season continues when the Eagles host the Rams on Sunday at Lincoln Financial Field. And if you want to see any of those games, and I know most of you are just worried about getting into Penn State, Oregon, if you don't already have ticket, Game Time always lists its price with fees, so you know exactly what you'll pay. I used Game Time to help some friends of mine look for tickets for Penn State Villanova last week. It worked out very well for them. And you can do the same by using promo code ON3, ON3 at checkout for $20 off your first purchase. I love the fact that they show you what you're going to pay before you even get to checkout, so there are no surprises. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, use code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You're going to need that $20 off, folks, if you're going to Penn State, Oregon. Every little bit's going to help if you're buying those tickets. And create an account and redeem code ON3, ON, and the number 3 for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Thank you to them for being a partner with us here on the BWI Live Show. We are going to get into James Franklin's comments from Tuesday night. The head coach of the Nittany Lions talked for about 12 minutes about a number of things. The first one we're going to get into is the conversation he had regarding young players and guys working to earn playing time. We are at the 3-week mark of the season, obviously, which means those decisions about green light, yellow light, things like that are starting to come more into focus. And that was the idea of this question, and balancing getting guys reps versus saving a year of eligibility. Here's what James Franklin had to say about that.
It's very important. I'd say it's a mix, right? It's frustration with some guys that I think could help us come the middle of the season on. And the coaches seem to have a greater sense of urgency to get them ready than they do. And then there's other guys, that are ready to take that next step. Like, for example, Andy Kotelnicki talked about Tyseer after practice today. Tyseer looked like a guy who is very hungry to play and to get on the field and make a difference. And guys like that, I don't know when it's going to be, but his number is going to get called at some point, and he's going to be ready. And then there's other guys that are complaining that they should be playing, and their parents are sending text messages, and they're going to get in the game and won't be ready, and then we won't hear anything from anybody.
So this was probably the quote that most people, it jumped out to most people from last night. I'm going to start first with, again, you could tell, I think the end of that clip, if you went a little bit further, it said his focus for him and his staff is making sure that the 2% of unhappy situations that are essentially what I describe as a vocal minority don't overrule the 98% that are perfectly fine, normal, healthy, blah, blah, blah. So certainly that's a challenge when you're dealing with obviously a lot of people who have high expectations and want to be a part of the on-field production of this Penn State team. Before we get into the young guy part, T. Frank, let's start with what you and I have spent hours on this channel talking about, and that's Tyseer Denmark. Response to that quote from Seifert Carbon was Tyseer Denmark has a chance to be an X factor and spark on offense. Just give him a chance. And the reason I wanted to start with him, T. Frank, is because I think that his situation and the overall outlook of James Franklin's answer go hand in hand. It's all about consistency. And until you prove it to the coaches that you consistently can do your job, you're not going to get the chance, no matter what kind of spark you might be able to provide.
And that was kind of what led me to this conversation was really the Tyseer Denmark part and his flip, I think, from a guy who maybe had some of those body language issues last year. And I'm not saying that it was necessarily he was frustrated he wasn't playing, but maybe he was frustrated with his play. He's always been a guy that I've noticed practices hard, but there was the consistency part where maybe he let some of his mistakes get to him. So in that highlight video you saw earlier, if you're watching on the podcast or you're listening on the podcast version, Tyseer Denmark came up 3 separate times, and he was the only guy that went against a starter, King Mack and Dejon Lane. I'm sorry, King Mack and Zakee Wheatley. I think Belgrave Shorter might have been the 3rd time. But like the intensity he was playing with, the focus that I saw from him, these things are subtle and they, might be making them up in your head, but I noticed a different level of intensity from him, which is why I asked Franklin about that question later on in the evening, because it was clear they were working with those young guys. They were working with some of the corners and the receivers that they want to see later in the year contribute, and Denmark was the one who stood out in terms of his performance in that moment. And then I don't want to make too much of this, but during his first rep, he goes against Zakee Wheatley, he catches a ball, and then they tell him to finish, and he is like pounding the earth, sprinting as fast as he can to the end zone to finish the rep, in a one-on-one on-air situation. And then as they're walking back together. And like, I'm not totally focusing on it, but it seemed like they were exchanging information about that rep, right? So these are the little things where you're getting better and you're trying to coach each other. You're trying to make each other better. Those are the working hard and doing the little things in the shadow so you're ready for that moment sort of stuff. And Denmark, right, I think, is the guy on top of the list of players they want to see. How he fits into the offense, I think he's the direct backup to Traber Pena in the slot. And then within that, like, there is a certain aspect of the offense I think we haven't seen of using those guys more over the middle than some other outbreaking routes we've seen. Because if Seifert Carbon wants him to be what he is as a game breaker, he needs to have a two-way go in the middle of the field where he has some catch and run opportunity. If all the balls are leading them out of bounds, none of the receivers are really going to have that opportunity in this offense. And so far, the main diet of the offense hasn't been necessarily Tysier Denmark level of making a play, unless it's one of those screenplays, jet sweeps, end around sort of thing in the offense. But I think generally, like, his impact on the offense is a playmaker over the middle, and something we haven't really seen them do. So yeah, to talk to the idea of him being a spark on the offense, it might also be a tonal shift within the passing game over the next couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about players making plays. James Franklin was asked to evaluate his transfer wide receivers. After the first 3 weeks of the season, I think everyone should be happy with that group so far. But what he was talking about in response to this question, he took it in a direction that he was thinking about, as he often does, and provided great insight, was what's next for that group and this offense overall. Here's what he had to say.
The reality is, say you got 12 of those guys when you count all 3 tight ends, 2 running backs, quarterbacks, the receivers that we're talking about. If all those guys make the plays that they're supposed to make, and then if each one of them makes one special play a game where they bring something more to the table than the O-line or the scheme got them, we're going to be in good shape. Again, you're talking about, when you talk about the tight ends and the receivers and the running backs, that's 8 special plays a game. That adds up quick. And then just the consistency. So, I don't look at like a contested catch as a special play. We got to make those. People call them 50-50 balls. They should not be 50-50 balls on the offense when you know where the ball's going and where the ball location should be.
So obviously, I think if you boil down Penn State fans' frustration with the offense over the first 2 weeks, it would at least in a large part be about this, about what is the next step in terms of those kind of plays. So Drew Allar's touchdown pass to Traber Pena, an example. His Devontae Ross touchdown pass earlier this year, an example. Katron Allen's long touchdown run, an example. But if James Franklin wants 8 of those a game, Penn State has not had them over the course of the first 3 weeks. And certainly I think when the go to the flip side and making the plays that the scheme and the offensive line do give you, Penn State hasn't made all of those either. So at the very least, Penn State is James Franklin, and from top down, know what they need to do, especially against Oregon, but just in general, to be better. And so that, I think it was probably refreshing for fans to hear that last night. Yeah,
and I love the way he framed it, because I just love it when, like, something we say here, talk about on the show, like, he says it, and I'm like, okay, so I'm not crazy. Like, that is how you think about it too. Above what the offense and the scheme get you, to me, is like a huge thing for Penn State football, and has been one of the, it's been one of the sticking points for this offense for a while, whether it's running backs or receivers, making plays that the offensive coordinator can get you open, right? Like, there are certain plays. I think Andy Kotelnicki has proven he can get Tyler Warren open. He can get Amari Evans open. He can get these players. He can design plays for guys to get them into the open field. When you get there, what do you do? What is your individual contribution to the play? And so breaking tackles, making explosive plays beyond what, if you catch the ball at 10 yards and you get 11 yards, that's you making the expected play. And I thought it was very interesting of him talking about contested catches, because the point of the question was transfer receivers, what have you seen from them? And he said flashes above what I expected and flashes below what I expected, but most of it is right in the expected area. So some of the things, Kyron Hudson, elite catches out of bounds, right? One toe and at the full extent of his frame. That's a catch I would say above expectation, where it's just like at the absolute extreme of what you would expect from a guy to catch. Trevor Pena breaking a tackle against FIU, I want to say it was, and getting 30 yards after the catch or something like that. Luke Reynolds, those guys getting yards after the catch. And for the running backs, they have struggled to do that. Historically, throughout their career, Katron Allen has been able to do that and not get yards. Like, he can break tackles, but then it turns into 4 yards maybe. And then Nick Singleton struggles to break tackles, but when he gets in the open, he's gone, right? So this year, as you mentioned, Katron Allen has been the guy, I think, doing the heavy lifting for the entire offense of consistently getting yards above expectation, even on a 3 or 4 yard run where it was a 0 yard run. The offense got you nothing, and then you got 3 yards. He's been the guy being able to do that consistently in the offense. So I think it's a really interesting way of looking at it of Nick Singleton doesn't need to break every tackle. If he breaks one and gets 40 yards, that's him doing his job in that game. And I think it's a refreshing way to frame what we've been talking about, which is like the offensive line isn't bad guys. Right. The offensive line, for the most part, has been doing their job. The skill players, for several years now, there has been a push to have them make plays in the open field. And so far, they have struggled to do that, I think, historically, and they're still trying to get more out of that now with this group.
Right. And so I think that'll be interesting to watch. Obviously, a huge part of this Oregon game is going to be finding those hidden yards that leads to points. And obviously, Penn State and its fans are both frustrated by the fact that Penn State has stalled out in opponent territory so many times and turned potential touchdowns into field goals. You know, again, Ryan Barker is among the leaders in field goals attempted. The good news is he's also among the leaders in field goals made. But at the same time, field goals probably aren't going to beat Oregon at home next week, and they probably aren't going to beat Ohio State on the road in November, let alone Iowa out there, and so on and so forth. So, you know, again, I don't want to take anything away from Ryan Barker's start, but to the point that James Franklin's making here, you get a few more of those quote-unquote special plays in recent weeks, and you're probably talking about more touchdowns instead of field goals. All right, speaking of players making special plays, T. Frank, the last one we have from James Franklin's news conference, and again, you can watch the entire thing right here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, is a focus on Drew Allar. Let's hear what he had to say about the senior quarterback.
Yeah, I think the management, Kotelnicki puts a ton on his plate in the run game, in the pass game, in protections. He's done a really good job of that. Kind of like what we just talked about with the receivers. There's been 3 or 4 throws that we should be making, and we got to make sure that that's happening week in and week out, every single game. And then just like the play that he had to Pena, he can make some throws that very few people on the planet can make. So the same discussion I just had with about the receivers and the running backs and the tight ends, same thing at the quarterback position.
And there's no question about that, T. Frank. Yeah, I know. I was thinking of you as soon as this came up because
this is a great quote. This is a great conversation. Please put Stephen Light's comment up on the channel. And Stephen, you know I love you. Take a ton off his plate. When he was a freshman, and we were talking about Drew Allar, and we're talking about him as like this ultra talented player, but like it was very conservative and it was very like don't make mistakes, and that kind of caused him maybe to be gun shy about throwing the ball deep. And then now he's a senior and he's doing a bunch of stuff pre-snap that is going to get you in the right look, in the right read to get the right play. And now we're saying don't have him do that. We can't swing wildly between one and the other. I know that he's not playing the way everybody wants him to, but like we are now fully throwing everything out when it comes to Drew Allar, where it's like before we want him to do more as a senior we want him to do more as a quarterback. We want him to do more as a quarterback. Now he's doing more as a quarterback, and you're like, well, that's not working, so do less. And it's like, oh my goodness, we have fully jumped the shark on Drew Allar, and it's just. There's so many things there's so many aspects of this that are frustrating. And part of it is like this I agree with a lot of the conversation around Villanova in terms of it doesn't matter they play drop 8 for how you're supposed to go about these things. And let's get into now what I think Steven wants from his quarterback. And I'm going to just talk about Villanova. And James talked about the plays he's supposed to make, right? And the things he needs to do, and then how he does more every game than just what the scheme can get him. So let's talk about Villanova's drop 8. There are certain plays, and I did a video that I'm going to post today, breaking down where they just had players in position to take away where the routes were going because they are not stupid. Like, it was a good team that is well coached and disciplined. And I know that everyone's rolling their eyes and you're not paying attention anymore. But like, if they put an extra defender where the first read is, Drew's job is to not throw it to that player. So then when you do that, other players, they're allowed to shift other players away from where they would conventionally be and take away threats to the other side of the field. And this is all very vague, I'm sorry. It's very hard to describe some of these things, so you should check out the video. But what should have Drew done in those situations? He was very on schedule. If you've got 3 linemen rushing you, virtually you have all day. The weakness of zone coverage is time. And Drew was trying to play on time too often. He was feeling the pressure of anticipating and where that there was pressure coming. So, in that specific game against Villanova, extend plays. Be patient in the pocket. Patience through your reads. Make them defend all your athletes over time. It's not about simplifying things pre-snap so that Allar can do whatever. Like, that's not going to unlock Allar's abilities. In fact, taking that away takes away the thing that he's doing best right now, which is understanding the defense and getting you into the right read for the run game. They got into multiple opportunities. This is all better with film, but last week Villanova was playing more even front, meaning 2 defensive linemen inside the tackles instead of playing an odd front with a tackle over the center of the nose. And you run different plays based on those things. Drew Allar saw the alignment that they shifted to after everything, like right before the snap, Villanova shifted to a different lineup. So he changes the play to their outside zone, and then Nick Singleton, I think, ripped off like 10 yards on the run or something along those lines. Like by recognizing what the front is and changing the run play from probably a counter or a power into their basic bread and butter zone, which they practice all the time, that's him elevating the offense, but nobody knows about that. Nobody talks about those plays because you don't see them. It's just the pre-snap jitter where everyone's just waiting for the play to happen. And so I don't blame people for not understanding those things, but now if we're saying like take stuff off the table, you are now taking away the part of a senior quarterback that can help you win games. So like there has to be an understanding of like what is and isn't working within Allar's game and the context of the play through the first 3 games of the season. So there's no end to this. I just need to stop talking, Greg, because we can go into another aspect of his play because it's everything. It's the whole offense. He's responsible for the whole offense.
Right. And so I think the other thing is so many people are clinging to or overanalyzing or reading too much into his, and I'm talking Drew Allar's quote from 2 weeks ago when he said about overthinking too much in that FIU game. And to me, I think everyone wants that to mean on the field, and I think it means off the field as much as on the field. You don't have to, if you see one clip of him after a bad couple series on the sidelines, he looks dejected. He does not look like the quarterback of the number 2 team in the country. And I think has as much to do with the overthinking part of it as anything, the flushing of mistakes and moving on. And that's talked about for a couple years now.
Yeah, and that is separate and apart from like what he's doing on.
Right.
There is a point where there is an information overload for some quarterbacks, and you can making a bunch of decisions, and we're having a misconversation in the chat once again about RPO versus read option. They are separate things. But you can have both of those plays, those addendums onto a play. So here's how it works. Here's the basic play. Like just the middle between my hands is the basic play. A read option is a tag on the play. Is this run going to have the running quarterback option on the backside? Yes or no? And then on top of that, there can be another tag, which is the RPO tag. And you can have both of those on the same play. So it's not necessarily processing the information pre-snap and doing all these things. It's the bang of in the moment making the decision, is it the right time to keep or no? And then before you make the read option decision, is it the right time to throw the RPO on a read play? So there are these layered decisions that you have to make pre and post snap on a play where you're just chaining decisions together, and the more times you make decisions, the more opportunity there is for a mistake. And so, I think the only guy who's been elite at chaining those decisions together was Trace McSorley in that particular offense, which featured the option and it's triple option is what it is. It's triple option football. It's just sliced in a different way where it's not, the dive and the pitch. There's also, the dive, the run option, and the pitch being a passing play out in the flat, or it's just you go right to the throw on a play. I have not seen that particular issue with Allar because they haven't been running a lot of those RPO read option combo plays where he's making a lot of those decisions. It's been pretty vanilla. Yes, there have been options, but not every read option is actually a read option. All handoffs look that way now, where there's the mesh point. It's whether or not he's actually reading the player and deciding whether or not he should keep. There have been examples where he should have kept and he didn't. And there is an open question of, is he doing that intentionally to avoid any hit whatsoever in these non-conference games where Penn State still won 52-6. They didn't need the read option to win the game. Now, did it look clean? It did not look clean. But we still, I think, to go back to yesterday's show, what they do against Oregon is the real thing. Bar none, full stop. So we'll find out.
We will. And that was always going to be the case over these first three non-conference games. I talked to a friend yesterday who was curious about the outlook we have over
I don't know how many times we have to say this in a row. I'm sorry, Chris. I'm sorry, Greg. Allar isn't pulling the ball. He's letting Singleton run into loaded boxes. Yes. And the question is whether or not that's intentional, of whether or not they are choosing to say, Trace, I'm saying too many names.
Yeah.
Drew, don't pull the ball. Yes, there's an option here, but is there really an option? And we've seen in big moments, he ran through the A gap against Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. He will keep the ball. He has chosen to keep the ball before in the past.
Yes. So I don't know if, again, I think that's a question we're just not going to know so many things until after the Oregon game. Remember, right after the Oregon game, you're going to get T. Frank's live, unfiltered thoughts, just like you just did on the BWI postgame show. So be sure to tune in for that. And obviously tomorrow's BWI live show brought to you by, just like this show, Academy Sports and Outdoors. Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody will get you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find grills, canopies, jerseys, and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, all at undefeatable prices every day. And be sure to check out their physical locations in Harrisburg and York. Fun can't lose, and neither can you with tailgate gear from Academy. So thank you to Academy Sports and Outdoors. Speaking of not losing, in the stock up, stock down segment, there has to be winners and losers, and that's where we're taking this show next. All right, so stock up, stock down is our weekly, and in this case, 3-week look at the Penn State football program. So we are, just for the record, just for clarity, we are phrasing this as a stock up, stock down for the non-conference portion of the season. Last week, we just did it coming out of FIU. This week, we're taking all 3 games into account. And so, but before we get that far, Patrick says maybe they're intentionally keeping the offense stale and saving all the excitement for Oregon. That is, every year that seems to be the things people cling to, is that, well, they're saving stuff. And I just think it is such a mixture, T. Frank, of, again, you're playing against the defenses you can. You've written about this. You've talked about this. You have detailed in depth what Penn State is getting defensively looks wise. And there's some stuff that they haven't put in the game plan because they didn't think it was going to work against what they're going to get. So when you're saying intentionally keeping it stale, Patrick, I think that the bigger point is Penn State is intentionally picking the parts of its playbook it thinks has the best chance to win in that given week.
Yes. With the caveat that here's the thing. James Franklin said in week 2 before FIU, there's aspects that we want to get some work done on. Obviously, the passing game with 3 new receivers, we want to get Ross involved a little bit more. So what did they do over the next 2 weeks? They threw the deep ball more often than they have in the last 2 years. And to your point, like they're only seeing certain coverages. One of the reasons we're talking about like the offense having a lack of rhythm is on 1st and 15, they went for a shot play twice against Villanova. They're doing things intentionally to emphasize parts of the offense they want to build chemistry in and to put on tape. Like they want to put it on tape that if you play cover 3 and Devontae Ross is on the field, we will throw it deep and eventually we'll hit one of them. Because, they hit one of them, and that in a big game, a touchdown like that swings momentum. So are they going to do it as much in the future? Probably not. They're probably not going to do those specific things where they're trying to get that one specific receiver into the game a lot. It didn't work very well against FIU, or it worked inconsistently, so they tried it again against Villanova. And then we just had the whole conversation about the read option and whether or not Allar's going to keep it. That has always been a do it when you need it sort of situation. So yes, I don't think that they're hiding anything, but they are intentionally not using or overemphasizing parts of the offense and distorting our opinion of what they're doing. And that's been what we've been saying for 2 weeks is like, how does that work out? Like if they beat Oregon, no one's going to give a shit about any of this.
Correct.
Excuse my language.
That's a great headline, T. Frank. Yeah, get that over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com today. Yes.
If they win, we will laugh about and people will have their whatabouts and their receipts about all the hand-wringing about the offense. Mm-hmm. But right now, to me, it is very clear that this is not the offense they would build to win 60 or 70 to nothing over all of these other teams. And also, there is a concern where they didn't just roll Villanova and FIU anyway. Both are true. Like the hand-wringing is, as usual, way higher than the actual concern should be, but it's not like the concern is zero. That's just the way the internet works.
Yeah, I was going to say, you took the words right out of my mouth. In a world where we tend to overestimate things that are bad and maybe not put enough focus on things that are good, Penn State's start here, because they did not roll those opponents, is certainly in focus. All right, well, stock up, stock down is where we took this show, and we didn't get there yet, but we're going to now. Stock up. We're going to go 3, 2, 1, so the number 3 player on our list is up next.
Number 3.
Frank, you are starting on offense in the stock up segment. I am starting on defense. Give me your pick.
Yeah, so I realized that what I did is I just kind of copied my notes from practice yesterday and made some of those guys my stock up players, and I was like, no one cares about Egan Boyer and Garrett Sexton here in the stock up segment. Luke Reynolds. Luke Reynolds is my number 3. A lot of people called this that they wanted to see Luke Reynolds beat the number 1 tight end, and I don't know that it's really like there is a number 1 or number 2 tight end. Both guys they play different roles within the offense, but it's very clear the effective pass catcher right now is Luke Reynolds between the two. And Andrew Epier's made some plays as well. Khalil Dinkins is still working on getting going in the passing game. They have not been able to get him on rhythm and kind of in sync with Drew Allar on some of these situations. But Luke Reynolds, like when you need plays, when they need a play to get Allar back in flow, they've been going to Luke Reynolds. And I think that speaks to how this offense might go in the future. And having him as that tight end target at the top of the list for him, I think everyone's excited about that. And people who wanted to see him take over, you're getting to see some of that early here in the year.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to the defensive side of the ball, and I'm going to focus on 2 freshman defensive players to start. Obviously, Jameer Joseph had the pick 6 last week. Jazz Coleman has flashed. Those 2 guys are stock up for me just because I think with Coleman, it was about the height matching on the field results, and the stat sheet doesn't tell you a whole lot, but you can see why Penn State's like, yeah, we're going to unlock this guy and see what happens. Yeah. And then with Joseph, I don't really know if anyone had him necessarily pegged to play 2 games and play as much in the 2 games that he has played so far that he has. So I'm really curious to see what the Penn State plan is here. Obviously, he can play in up to 2 more games before the 5th one would burn his red shirt. You would be shocked, barring injury, if you see him against Oregon. So he feels like one of those guys that you kind of wait to see how the rest of this season plays out. I think in a perfect world, T. Frank, they would play him in 2 more regular season games and then maybe expand his role for the bye week. I don't think ideally they want to play him in 5 games or more and use a year of eligibility. At the same time, and I think that's especially furthered by the fact that you're already burning 1 red shirt in this class with Darius Dixon. However, you don't know how injuries are going to shake out, and you don't know, when you get that middle of October portion of things, where guys are going to be at. So I would say, at least for him, the stock up is that Penn State, he has put enough on tape that Penn State feels like it's worth burning his red shirt. Certainly, I think it would be worthwhile for him this year, even though he's not going to play a number of snaps that maybe some other guys will.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear he's number 5 in the rotation. I don't think they're going to play more than 4, with Darius Dixon being that other guy you mentioned. At the same time, he's played 2, and it's funny, I was thinking of him as a late enrollee. He just enrolled in May, when freshmen used to enroll, and so the clock has been accelerated so far. It feels like he's late, but it's very impressive what he's done so far. He's looked good. It's all been in mop-up duty, so I don't necessarily want to overrate that, but that's also when you make a play like he did, you're going to get noticed. That's what the whole point is, to make plays when you have the opportunity to make them.
All right, moving on to number 2, stock up portion of this stock up, stock down segment.
Number 2.
Are going to the safety room, and a guy we talked about earlier, T. Frank.
Yeah, King Mack. Just the full breadth of the story. I think he should be the number 1 player. Because we started in the spring where he was going to be a part of that nickel competition. Then he gets hurt, and then we don't hear anything about him all summer. And then the next thing we hear about is, oh, by the way, he's at safety now. So I look at this kind of as, once he got his feet wet at the safety position, he immediately started making his way up the roster and up the depth chart, because this is where I think he's at his best and his most comfortable, is at that boundary safety position where he can be involved in the run game. He's an enforcer. He's a thumper. He's a guy who comes downhill. I think what we haven't seen necessarily is his comfort in coverage. We saw him make some plays, but again, 4th down, you know where the stop is that you need to make. It's not necessarily like you have to protect the end zone as much in that situation. But I would imagine he's done pretty good in practice if they're putting him in there at that number 1 safety position next to Zakee Wheatley. So his journey from a guy on the sideline to the starting lineup this year from May until now has been an exceptional story for Penn State, and one that I think everyone hoped would happen when they got him on the roster back from Alabama. And it's worked out in a lot of ways the way we thought originally before they mentioned him as a nickel player. So watching that rise, I don't think there's anybody who's had a higher stock up over the long term of this season than King Mack.
Yeah, transfer receivers are my number 2, not because they've blown anybody away these first 2 weeks, but after some more misses than hits for Penn State in the portal at receiver so far in the James Franklin era, these guys have at least, at minimum, I think, matched the expectations for them coming in. Again, none of them have had, they've all been in the end zone. They've all kind of had their moment where you're like, yep, Penn State can win with this guy. And so stock up for those guys just simply based on the fact that what we thought they were going to be has so far been closer to what it reality than not. And I think that no matter how much confidence you had in these guys based on what they did in the past, T. Frank, I don't know if you were going to believe it until you saw it.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when Trevor Pena, again, gets here after spring ball, and we've had some of the conversation about what's their ceiling. What is the ceiling, the athletic ability of this group overall? And they have been, as James Franklin said, flashing above what Penn State would have expected of them when they recruited them all out of the portal. So, yeah, overall, I think the receivers, that's absolutely right.
All right, who tops our stock up list? Let's get to it.
Number 1.
Did I steal your pick here?
You did, but I'm glad you did because I went somewhere else. Totally.
Okay. So you go to a guy. So the one you were going to pick that I picked, and I'll just get out of the way quickly, and then you can talk about both. But Tony Rojas is where I go here. He has looked better than obviously last year when he was playing with most of the season with an injury. And he is certainly, against Villanova, especially a very impactful guy in the middle of Jim Knowles' defense so far. So Rojas leads my list. Who leads yours?
I'm going Chaz Coleman. And just to your point there, he has 13 stops so far this year, and that's considering that didn't play a whole lot against Nevada, snap wise. I'm going Chaz Coleman. I wrote in my defensive film study stuff about Chaz Coleman that I'm surprised we haven't had any conversation whatsoever about. Now, I did bury it at the end because I think it's very important, and I wasn't going to then broadcast it all over the internet about what they might be doing with Chaz Coleman, but I kind of think they might be building some stuff around Chaz Coleman, a freshman. If that's the case, now this is kind of this is a speculative stock. Consider this this is a volatile stock right now, but I'm betting big on Chaz Coleman getting some things built around him. And oh boy, if that's right, I think it's pretty exciting. So not only let's just take from a pass rushing perspective. Last week they had a pass rushing play where he got a quarterback hit, where they had a overload to one side. They drop a player out from over top of the guard and essentially get him a one-on-one with the right tackle. To me, the way I read that play is they set that play up for him to have a one-on-one where he can go inside or outside on that tackle, and he absolutely crushed it and got a quarterback hit and a pressure on that play. If you're scheming plays for a freshman, that's that's crazy. And there's more evidence than that. But again, go check out the thing because I think it's pretty important over at the website. My defensive film room, I should say, not the thing.
Very good, T. Frank. All right, let's flip it over to the other side of the coin. Stock down. First up, number 3.
Number 3.
Take it away, buddy.
Go? Yeah,
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So my number 3 here is a guy you mentioned. I actually changed this. Thank God you didn't make a graphic because we would have had a wrong graphic. It is Khalil Dinkins on the stock down for me, number 3. I think that coming into the season, it was sort of a given that it felt like he would take, again, no one was going to be Tyler Warren, but some of the drops he's had so far this year, some of the inability to kind of get him in a rhythm in this offense has just been very interesting to me. I don't think it means he's going to have a bad season the rest of the way, but I don't know how he isn't on this list after the first 3 weeks, just based on what we've seen, based on what we expected from him as an older guy that was at least on paper ready to step up into that top tight end role.
It's fascinating, Greg, because he made the freaks list. Tyler Warren didn't make the freaks list. Tyler Warren isn't an athletic freak, and yet Dinkins is crushing it as a run blocker this year. He is picking up right where he left off, and maybe even a little bit better as a run blocker, where he's had some phenomenal plays. Now, he's some mental busts as well, but it's Khalil Dinkins, the receiver. That makes no sense because you would think that would be his skill set. He would be like a complete all-around tight end. But that receiving part, you're right. The stock down, I thought there was going to be an opportunity for him to have a focal point in the offense, and it really hasn't materialized yet.
Right. So that's why he's on the list for me, not as a blocker, because to your point, he's a tremendous blocker, but it's the receiving part of it that has him on here for me. All right. Where are you going, number 3?
Yeah, I'm going to go. I know that you said stock up on the receivers, and I generally agree with that, but I would say Devontae Ross stock down for a couple of reasons. In the offseason, we highlighted him as the guy who maybe had the highest level of potential to be a game breaker, a guy who's going to be, you'll remember him for those sort of plays. With Trey Burpena coming in and taking maybe some of the underneath routes and some of the consistency to the catch-to-catch thing, Ross has become a deep play threat, and that's kind of his role within this group. And I have concerns generally about his ability to go up and catch those contested catches. He caught one, but the other times, and what I saw from him on film at Troy, he's not a guy who tracks the ball in those situations overly well, and then he doesn't come back to them and make plays above the rim as often. So given Allar and Ross and they're mixed together, I'm a little bit stocked down still on the deep ball in this offense. The way it's being presented, I think they're going to get him open and he's going to rip off some big touchdowns against specific coverages. But in terms of a see ya goodbye deep threat that is just blanket strike fear into the defense. I don't know that that's going to be the way it plays this year.
All right, number 2.
Number 2.
Just a quick thing.
Go ahead.
Can I follow up? Because there's some good points here in the chat. He's 5'9". Yes, KJ Hamler was pretty good in contested catch situations at 5'9". Like you don't have to catch them all, but forcing the pass interference, I think, is part of it. And you can be physical. Trevor Pena is 5'10", maybe. And he's also physical in those situations. It's that he's 170 pounds to me. And then Ross points out, or Z-Man points out, Ross was banged up early. And yes, that is a part of the stock down here, is that is part of the narrative, which can change. But for now, that is part of the factor of why the stock is down for me.
Yeah, no question about it, T. Frank. I did bump Antoine Belgrave shorter into this section for me at number 2, only because, again, I think we're going to see King Mack take on a bigger role there. Belgrave shorter is going to have a role. He's going to play. But when you start preseason camp as the starter and it looks like you're having that role flipped by the 3rd week of the season, it's a logical conclusion, or inclusion rather, here. Who's your number 2? And I think this is the one Penn State fans are waiting for.
Yeah, Nick Singleton. I don't think there's any way around it, where he's had a featuring role in a couple of games in terms of number of carries and opportunities to break off big plays. And, I did a whole video about it on Monday, where one of the things we learned is, like, it's just not clicking yet in terms of his new coaching from Stan Drayton, that to make him more aware has kind of made him go into a shell and do what he's always done, where he's pressing now. And so he's becoming even more monolithic in his decision-making in the open field. So I think there's opportunity for it to get better. Like, he's not an idiot. He can learn. And, I think he puts in the effort to learn. So whether or not his instincts kick in and he can kind of holistically evolve as a runner, I think there's still an opportunity for it, but it's not happening right now. And you were hoping it would happen in these first 3 games. You'd see more progress. And I think we saw the opposite of progress there with Nick Singleton.
All right, let's get to number 1.
Number 1.
So I thought you would have this guy on your list leading the way, and maybe it's just too low-hanging fruit, but I think it's obviously Cooper Cousins. Not that he's having a bad start to the year when he does get on the field. Is he playing? I think was the offense productive when he got in last week? Yes. It's just, to me, you thought he was penned into a starting spot to open his second season at Penn State. Did not earn it based on who came back and won jobs in training camp, and that's why I have him here at this point.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I guess it's kind of leveled out for me. We had him on last week. I guess that was my the stock is now where I expected. Like, it has not sunk further, so I didn't consider that. But I think if we're talking about for the first 3 games of the season, you're absolutely right. Some of the warts have shown up because we only got to see the good stuff from Cooper Cousins last year. For me, it's Jalen Harvey, because after Max Granville went down, the guy who's been on the roster the longest got the first opportunity. And I don't think he's been playing terribly, but there have been more mental mistakes and more physical mistakes, where that big long run from Villanova, where they ran right through the A gap and everyone thought it was Amari Campbell's fault. I put that on Jalen Harvey. I think he was supposed to be in the B gap on that one, and he got blocked outside. So there are plays where I don't think that he's maybe as consistent. He's a redshirt freshman. Like, the stock should be just level. The problem is Chaz Coleman. Like, the problem is the opposite is we see that of a guy who's not making as many mistakes and who is making impact plays at the same position as a true freshman. So, like, in the comparison of the two, Coleman is now the 3rd defensive end. And so, by nature, Jalen Harvey's stock goes down a little bit as the guy we looked at first to fill that void where Max Granville was.
Right. All right. Well, we will have more stock down, stock up info, and also recaps of Penn State's first 3 games at BWIillustrated.com. You can join for $1 for the first week. Speaking of signing up places, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3, capital O, capital N3, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. If your bet loses, just make sure you use bonus code ON3 when you sign up. Make this college football season one for the history books and make it legendary. Last week, we did not get to do a Penn State portion of the best bet segment because when we did this show on Wednesday, BetMGM did not have a Penn State line out. Nittany Lions are now 0-3 against the spread this year, 2-1 against the over-under total to the over. They obviously are not playing this week, but BetMGM rather does have Penn State over 10.5 regular season wins still lined. It's now -110. Prior to the season, T. Frank, you're paying a premium on that of at least -130 or -140. No, it doesn't sound like a lot, 40 cent difference, but it adds up in the betting world. So I think Penn State, nothing has changed my opinion about this team enough to think it won't win at least 11 games this year, whether it loses to Ohio State and beats Oregon or vice versa. So I think you're getting a good line there at a discounted price based on the perception of this team after 3 weeks.
Gregor, are we fully into best bets now?
Yes.
Oh, well, sorry.
Oh,
we're contractually obligated to play this intro, and I'm not kidding about that. If you haven't guessed already, BetMGM is the exclusive partner here with On3 and Blue White Illustrated. So I want to make sure they got their they've been supportive of here what we're doing, not just here on this show, but the company overall. So we want to make sure they got their love here. So continue, Greg, with your best bets.
Yeah, thank you, T. Frank. So I think the discounted price on Penn State to win more than 10.5 games. Again, this line was brutal as it related to the juice that you had to pay to bet this before the season started. Nothing has changed in my mind. No one got hurt. The Penn State opponents haven't changed, and nothing about their outlook has necessarily changed. The betting board in terms of to make the playoffs for Penn State, to win the Big Ten for Penn State, so on and so forth have not changed. But this line's dropped. And I realized that at 10-2, maybe Penn State would still get in, and that would cash the under, but still put Penn State in the playoff. Nothing's changed my mind. I just think you're getting a cheaper price here for something that was worth betting before the season and is worth betting now.
So all the noise for the first 3 weeks has lowered the price, is what you're saying.
Yes, that's correct.
How about that, Penn State fans? Little bonus there for all your consternation and worry.
Yeah. All right. Number 2 on my list, we go to a game line this week in the Big Ten. I believe this game is on Friday, maybe. Anyway, it's sometime this weekend. Rutgers catching 2.5 points at home against Iowa. I went back and forth on this one a lot more than anybody should think about Hawkeyes Scarlet Knights on September 17th during the Penn State bye week. But 2 things stand out here. Rutgers has won all of its games so far. Its win over Ohio, which it was life or death to win. It looks a lot better in retrospect, considering how Ohio's played the last 2 weeks, including against Ohio State since then. So my question just here is, can they stop the Iowa run defense enough and score can they stop the Iowa rushing offense enough and score enough points against the, not bad Iowa defense to win this game? I'm going to go with yes. I'm taking the +2.5 at BetMGM. I think that Rutgers and Greg Schiano find a way to win this game at home. Perhaps it's just my bias against Kirk Ferentz and this Iowa offense that just kind of is what it is at this point. But that's where I land this week, T. Frank. Maybe not the strongest of feels for that game. Again, I'm worried about Rutgers' run defense, but I think the Scarlet Knights do enough at home to cover, and I'll call for them to win outright as well.
Okay. And then this last one, I'm sure I'm fascinated where you're going with this last one. Notre Dame. What are you doing with Notre Dame here?
Yeah, 2 of the best losses in the country. Again, they are currently +230 at BetMGM to still make the college football playoff. They do not have an overly easy schedule from here, but it should be one that they win out on. And at 10-2 as an independent, and the way that works for for their draw into the college football playoff, I just think they're going to finish this season much like last year, lose early, win out late. And the issue will be, of course, that that Notre Dame is going to have 2 losses and be compared to those 2 loss teams. But as things stand right now, they have the best 2 losses in America. And I think that will hold up for the most part down the road. So I think Notre Dame still gets in the playoff. Some will agree with that. Some will disagree with that, but it's our final BetMGM bet of the week, best bet segment is brought to you by BetMGM. We have some things to share with you. We're going to do that now from them.
See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer now for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossings Casino and Hotel.
That was T. Frank's fast rating. Thank you, T. Frank, for that. And I think that will just about do it for this week BWI live show. So here's the deal. We had a mailbag segment in this show rundown. As you can see, we're over an hour into this show, and we have the coordinators coming up for Penn State, Jim Knowles and Justin Lustig, which you'll be able to hear from later this afternoon at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. So we're going to break the mailbag out, T. Frank, into a separate video here on the YouTube channel. So if you're looking for that, please check back later today, tomorrow, whenever this gets up. We will cover your questions, some from the chat, some from the podcast feed, some from the message board here on YouTube, just not on this show.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. We can make sure we give the mailbag always gets a little bit crunched at the end of the show. So I want to make sure we have an opportunity to give them full consideration and thoughts as well. So there's still technically time. We've got a lot of good questions, but if you want to go check out we might even have a separate follow-up article if there are more mailbag questions over there on the site. So check that out and be looking for that later today. We're going to have that up tonight.
Alrighty, well, that's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. It's been another Wednesday of BWI Live. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, whether you did so live or on replay. Don't forget, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. It's $1 for the first week of access. We'll throw in a subscription for a year to The Athletic as well. And we all you covered throughout the rest of the Penn State bye week, and then we'll get you ready for Penn State, Oregon, and the Whiteout next week. That's Steve Frank. I'm Greg Pickle. We'll talk to you next time.